Okay, so today we're going deep on something I bet a lot of you are thinking about. How to speak English, more confidently and just more fluently.
Yeah.
We've got a really interesting set of discussions here between Jerry and Tom from the Beyond the Mic podcast.
Yeah.
Where they really get into it.
Yeah, they do.
They talk about their own struggles with learning to speak English and what strategies they found that actually worked for them.
Exactly.
So think of this as your, sort of shortcut to better English speaking. We're going to extract the most valuable, the actionable stuff.
Yeah.
So that you can make real progress.
Right.
Without feeling overwhelmed.
Absolutely.
There's just so much out there.
Yeah, there is.
Hard to know where to start.
Yeah, what really struck me was listening to Jerry and Tom was just how universal those initial hurdles are for English learners. They talked about that nervousness, like that fear of making a mistake.
Oh, yeah.
In front of someone, like just totally freezing up. And the sounds.
Yeah.
Getting your tongue around unfamiliar sounds.
Right.
Building your vocabulary. Wrestling with the grammar.
Grammar.
Yeah.
It can be so tricky.
It can be. Yeah.
So it's comforting to know you're not alone in facing these things.
Absolutely. And it's encouraging to know that they found ways to overcome these things so we can learn from them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's dive right in.
Okay.
To those challenges. I mean, Tom was really open about, his biggest hurdle, he said, was just being nervous. That fear that you're going to say something wrong.
Right.
And people are going to laugh at you.
Exactly.
Judge you.
Yeah. And Jerry pointed out that that's incredibly common.
Yeah.
A lot of learners, they freeze up because they're so worried about making a grammatical error. It's like you've got this
voice in your head.
Yeah, this inner critic.
Yeah.
Who's constantly, grading your every sentence.
You're like, oh no, not that tense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You should have used the past perfect there.
Oh, it's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever felt that way?
Oh, absolutely. I think everyone who's learned a second language has probably experienced that.
Yeah, you sort of feel like everyone's listening.
Yeah.
And judging.
Yeah.
But they're probably not.
They're probably not, no.
Yeah.
It's just our own
fears.
Yeah, there's insecurities coming out.
Right.
And what's interesting is that, that hesitation can actually hinder your fluency.
Yes.
You're so worried about making a mistake that you end up not speaking.
Right.
And then you don't get the practice you need.
Right. And the more you don't speak, the less fluent you become.
Exactly. It becomes a vicious cycle.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And then beyond that kind of initial anxiety, they also talked about more of the tangible difficulties like pronunciation. English has some sounds that just don't exist in other languages.
Definitely. And for people whose native language doesn't have those sounds, it can be really difficult to produce them.
To learn those, and there's a just sheer number of words.
Oh my goodness.
You need to know.
The vocabulary is huge.
It is huge. And then let's not forget the grammar.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, sometimes it feels like
it does.
There are more exceptions than rules.
It feels that way sometimes, yeah.
And something that kept coming up was the difficulty of making, regular practice a habit. And I think that's something a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah. It's so easy to let it slide.
Right.
You're busy. You've got other things going on.
Yeah. Life gets in the way.
And then you don't practice for a few days.
Yeah.
And then it's like starting all over again.
Right. And then the other thing is that tendency to, think in your first language. And then try to translate it all into English in your head.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. Does that sound familiar to you?
Oh, absolutely. Right. I think that's something that most language learners do.
Yeah.
Especially at the beginning.
Yeah. It's like you're trying to force your brain to think in a different way.
Like you've got this filter.
Yeah.
But you're trying to push everything through.
Right.
And it slows you down.
Yeah. But the good news is Jerry and Tom also shared some really practical tips for, how to actually lay that groundwork.
Okay.
So let's get into those.
Okay.
Those basic tips for building a foundation.
Yeah.
One thing that they were both really emphatic about was creating a daily English learning habit.
Absolutely.
And they suggested even just 30 minutes a day could make a huge difference.
It doesn't have to be hours and hours.
Not at all.
Just a little bit each day.
And it doesn't have to be intense studying.
No.
It could be anything from listening to a podcast to reviewing some vocabulary.
Or reading an article.
Or reading an article.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Watching a short video.
Exactly. And
Anything that gets you using the language.
right, that consistency is key.
Absolutely.
I think, it's like watering a plant,
Right.
little and often
Little and often.
is much more effective than one big soaking every now and then.
Yeah, it keeps the language alive in your mind, and it helps build that momentum.
So it's like a snowball effect.
Exactly. Yeah, the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Right.
The more progress you make.
Yeah. So what kind of daily habit do you think might fit into your routine?
That's a great question. I think it really depends on the individual and what their interests are. Some people really love watching movies, so maybe they could watch, 15 minutes of an English movie every day or a TV show.
Right.
Other people might really enjoy listening to music. So maybe they could listen to an English song, and read the lyrics while they're listening.
Yeah, and really pay attention to the recommendation.
Yeah, and how the words are used.
Right.
In the song.
It really depends on what you enjoy.
Exactly. Find something you like.
Yeah.
And then just do it regularly.
And fun, yeah.
Make it fun. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that daily practice is key.
Uh-huh.
And then alongside that, they really stressed the importance of building your vocabulary.
Absolutely.
Bit by bit.
Yeah.
They suggested learning maybe 5 to 10 new words each day.
Yeah, that's a good number.
Yeah.
It's manageable.
Manageable, right?
But it adds up over time.
It really does add up.
Yeah.
And they said, and this is crucial, actively trying to use them.
Yes.
In sentences.
You can't just memorize a definition.
No.
You have to use the words.
Right.
You have to make them your own.
Put them into practice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Get them out there.
Yeah.
Into the real world.
It's about moving those words from your passive vocabulary, words that you recognize, to your active vocabulary.
Words you can actually use.
Words you can use when you're speaking.
So have you ever tried to do that?
Oh, yeah.
Actively incorporate?
I do that all the time.
Right.
I mean, I'm always learning new words.
Yeah.
And I make a conscious effort to use them in my conversations.
And it probably feels weird at first.
It does.
Right.
But the more you do it, the more natural it becomes.
Yeah.
And eventually, you don't even have to think about it.
You just use them. Yeah.
You just use them. Yeah.
Okay. So now this next tip I found really interesting.
Yeah.
And maybe a little less obvious.
Okay.
Talking to yourself in English.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Jerry mentioned that he got into the habit of narrating his actions while taking a shower.
Like, I'm turning on the water.
Yeah.
The water is hot.
Yeah.
I'm washing my hair.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Tom said he would describe what he was doing while cooking.
I'm chopping the vegetables.
Right.
I'm adding the spices.
Yeah.
I'm stirring the pot.
And even just standing in front of the mirror and having a little English monologue.
Right.
It might feel a bit strange at first.
It does.
Right.
But it really helps
Yeah.
build confidence.
Have you ever tried anything like that?
Oh, yeah. I used to do that all the time.
Really?
When I was first learning English, I would just talk to myself,
Yeah.
about anything.
What I was doing, what I was thinking.
Did you feel self-conscious?
At first, yeah. But then I realized nobody was listening.
Exactly.
So it didn't matter.
Right.
And it really helped me to get over that fear of speaking.
Yeah, the fear of making mistakes.
Exactly.
Because you're in a safe space.
You're in your own little world.
Right.
And you can experiment.
You can make all the mistakes you want.
Exactly. And nobody's going to judge you.
Right.
So it's a great way to build that initial layer of comfort with the language.
It takes the spotlight off.
It does.
Right.
You're not worried about what other people think. You're just focused on, getting the words out.
And getting comfortable with the sound.
Exactly. Yeah. And the rhythm of the language.
Okay. And then a really crucial point they made. Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Oh, that's so important.
I know. They kept emphasizing that errors are a natural and essential part of the learning process.
Absolutely.
I think this is where a lot of people get stuck.
They do.
Right?
They're so afraid of making a mistake.
Right.
That they don't speak at all.
Right.
Or they only speak when they're absolutely sure that they're going to say everything perfectly.
And that's just not realistic.
It's not. I mean, even native speakers make mistakes.
We do all the time.
All the time, yeah.
So how can we expect learners to be perfect.
It's an unrealistic expectation.
It is.
Yeah.
So we need to shift our mindset.
Absolutely.
Right.
We need to see mistakes as opportunities to learn.
Yeah.
Not as failures.
Instead of being embarrassed by them.
Right.
Right.
We should embrace them.
Yeah.
Use them as a way to improve our language.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
Mistakes as opportunities.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then finally they talked about
gradually developing the habit of thinking directly in English.
Oh, yeah, that's the ultimate goal.
Right. Instead of going through that mental translation from your native language.
it's a tough one.
That sounds like a big leap.
It is.
Right.
But it's so important because it really frees you up,
Yeah.
to speak more fluently
Right.
when you're not constantly translating
Right.
in your head.
You can just focus on getting your message across.
You can just be in the moment
Right.
and let the words flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you even begin to do that?
Well, it's a gradual process.
I imagine so.
It takes time
Yeah.
and it takes practice.
Yeah.
But one thing that can really help is to immerse yourself in the language.
Yeah. Surround yourself with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, listen to English music, watch English movies,
Right.
read English books,
Yeah.
talk to English speakers, talk to yourself in English.
Exactly. The more you expose yourself to the language,
Yeah.
the easier it will become
Right.
to start thinking in English.
So it's like building a new neural pathway
It is.
in your brain.
You're training your brain
Yeah.
to think in a different way.
It's like learning a new skill.
It is. It's like learning to play a musical instrument
Right.
or learning to ride a bike.
It takes time,
It takes time and practice.
but eventually you get there.
You do.
Yeah.
And it becomes second nature.
Okay. So we've got those foundational tips.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's get into
Okay.
some practical exercises
Yeah.
that you can actually do to boost your fluency.
Right.
One that Jerry was really enthusiastic about was shadow speaking.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah. And that's where you listen to, English audio or video,
Right.
and you repeat what you hear
Yeah.
almost simultaneously.
You're mimicking the speaker, their rhythm, their intonation.
So you're like an echo.
You're like an echo. Yeah. And it can feel a little bit strange
Yeah. I imagine so.
at first.
Yeah.
But it's really effective.
Have you ever tried that?
I have.
Yeah. Okay. It's a great way to improve your pronunciation. Right. And just get a feel for the natural flow of the language.
Music of the language.
Yeah, the music of the language, exactly.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend it.
Okay. And then Tom suggested role playing.
Oh, that's classic.
Yeah.
But it's a classic for a reason.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It works,
Right.
practicing conversations in different everyday scenarios,
Yeah.
like ordering food at a restaurant
Right.
or checking into a hotel.
Or asking for directions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can do this
Yeah.
with a language partner, or you can even just
Yeah.
imagine the situation
Right.
and play both roles yourself.
Right.
So 1 minute you're the customer.
The next minute, you're the waiter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's a great way to practice.
Yeah.
Different vocabulary, different grammar structures.
And get comfortable with this situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because when you're actually in those situations in real life,
Right.
you don't want to be,
Yeah.
fumbling for words.
You want to be prepared.
You want to be prepared.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So role playing is a great way.
It's like a dress rehearsal.
It is, right, for real life.
Okay. And then there are language exchange apps
Oh, yeah. Those are great.
like Hello Talk,
Mm-hmm.
Tandem Cambly.
Yeah. There are so many of them out there now.
Yep.
And they're all really good.
Yeah.
Different ways.
And that's where you can connect
Yeah.
with native English speakers for conversation practice.
Right.
And they're often learning your language too.
Yeah, it's a great way to, connect with people from all over the world and learn about different cultures.
And practice your English.
And practice your English. Exactly.
What kind of topics do you think you'd want to discuss?
Oh, gosh. Anything, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's always interesting to talk to people about their lives, their culture, their experiences.
They do for work.
Yeah. Their hobbies, their interests.
All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Just, get to know them as a person.
Yeah.
And the language learning is almost like,
A side benefit.
yeah, bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Another interesting exercise
Oh.
that they mentioned was keeping a diary in English
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
and then reading it aloud. So that way you're practicing both your writing and your speaking skills.
Yeah, you're getting double the practice.
Double the practice, right?
Yeah.
And you're reinforcing the new vocabulary.
And the grammar, that you're learning. So it's a great way to really solidify that knowledge.
Make it stick.
Make it stick. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then when you read it aloud, you're also getting practice with pronunciation.
You can hear how it sounds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can identify any areas where you might need some extra work.
Yeah, like, oh, that doesn't sound right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then a simple but really effective tip.
Okay.
Watching English videos.
Oh, yeah. Right. These are great.
And they said, start with subtitles.
Right.
So you can follow along and then try watching them again.
Without subtitles.
Without subtitles.
Yeah, that's the challenge.
Yeah, to really test your listening.
Yeah.
Comprehension.
See how much you can understand.
Right. And it's a gradual way to train your ear.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, taking the training wheels off a bike. At first, it's a little bit wobbly, but eventually you get the hang of it.
You get your balance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then finally, they suggested recording yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking English.
That can be a little scary.
I know. Yeah.
A little awkward.
But it's really helpful.
Right.
Because you can hear.
Yeah.
You know what you sound like.
You can be objective about it.
You can be objective. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can identify areas where you might need to improve your pronunciation, your grammar, your vocabulary.
And it can really pinpoint those areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a great tool for self-assessment.
Yeah, it's like getting an outsider's perspective.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's you listening to yourself.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are a ton of practical things you can start incorporating
into your routine. Absolutely.
Now, where can you find good resources to help you on this journey?
Yeah, that's the key.
Finding the right resources.
Jerry and Tom shared a whole list of recommendations.
Okay, great.
So for YouTube, they mentioned channels like BBC Learning English.
Oh, that's a good one.
Rachel's English. Engvid.
Yeah, that's a classic.
That is fantastic.
It is, yeah.
Tom also added English with Lucy.
Oh, yeah. She's great.
Minglish. And English Speaking Success.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
Okay.
But I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, and he's specifically highlighted those.
Okay.
For pronunciation help.
Yeah, pronunciation is so important.
Right.
If you can't be understood, then it doesn't matter how good your grammar is.
Right. It's all for nothing.
It is, yeah.
If people can't understand you.
It's like you're speaking a different language almost.
Right.
Yeah.
So those YouTube channels are just amazing.
They are.
Right.
But they're free.
They're free.
They're high quality and they cover everything you could possibly need, from basic grammar to advanced vocabulary,
pronunciation tips
to conversational strategies.
Yeah.
They've got it all.
They really do have it all.
Yeah.
Have you explored any of those?
I have, yeah.
Okay.
I've used a few of them.
Which ones?
I really like Rachel's English. I think she does a great job of explaining the sounds of English in a way that's really easy to understand.
Enough to check that out.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
She's got a lot of great videos on her channel.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so then for language learning apps, they suggested some of the well-known ones.
Yeah.
Like Duolingo, Babbel, Memrise.
Yeah, those are all good.
Yeah, and those can be a good structured way to learn vocabulary.
Yeah.
And some basic grammar.
Yeah, and they're really convenient.
Right.
You can use them on your phone.
You can use them anywhere.
Anywhere, yeah.
Yeah.
On the bus, on the train.
While you're waiting in line.
Exactly. So they're a great way to, just fit in a little bit of practice.
Squeeze in some practice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then for podcasts, they recommended 6 Minute English by the BBC.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic.
English Learning for Curious Minds and All Ears English.
Okay. I haven't heard of that one.
Okay.
But I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. And those are great for improving your listening comprehension.
Absolutely.
And exposing yourself to, different accents.
Different accents, yeah.
In different ways.
And just natural conversations.
Right.
You're hearing real people talking.
Yeah, in real life situations. So what kind of topics do you usually enjoy listening to?
In podcasts.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
I'm interested in science and technology. So I listen to